that's what we have to remember here. This is lost taxpayer dollars. Just $600,000, that's a large amount of money, but that's just what we found.
3 former Arizona Department of Education employees are accused of using ghost children to illegally pocket more than $600,000 from the Empowerment Scholarship Account program. The alleged school voucher fraud occurred during the final year of Democratic Superintendent Kathy Hoffman's term in office and continued well into the first year of Republican Tom Horne's term. Democratic Attorney General Kris announced the charges against the state employees and 2 other people late last week. That came just days after the AG's blockbuster lawsuit against apartment landlords, whom she accused of illegally colluding to raise your rent. I sat down with Kris at the end of the week to discuss both cases.
It's really unimaginable that we have a situation where people inside the Arizona Department of Education were stealing ESA money, and we're creating fake birth certificates and essentially ghost children in order to funnel money to themselves. And I think it shows very clearly what a lot of us have been worried about for a long time, that this is a program that is ripe for fraud.
Why weren't there safeguards on that?
I mean, I think...
And are birth certificates required under the law?
They're required, but these were forged, and they were not checked, apparently. Well, obviously, they were forged by the people inside ADE. The problem is, what this scam and scheme shows is that it's very easy to cheat, and it's very easy to get a fake birth certificate past the Arizona Department of Education. So why were there not more controls? I think it starts with the legislature that passed legislation that doesn't have controls. It starts with legislators who don't care about fraud, waste, and abuse, or they would have put some guardrails on this program. And it's Tom Horne, you know. I mean, he's sat in front of the cameras the other week and said there's no fraud in the system, and I'm rooting out any potential, fraud. That obviously is not the case. This was happening under his own nose, and it's very problematic.
So 40 felonies, $600,000 plus in lost taxpayer dollars.
Yes, this is, and I think that's what we have to remember here. This is lost taxpayer dollars. Just $600,000, that's a large amount of money, but that's just what we found. You know, and if this fraud had been allowed to go on, if we hadn't found it, it would have been multiplied probably by millions of dollars just for the children and the parents that were engaged in it. And again, some of them were fake children. So, you know, I think a reasonable person would conclude that it's highly likely there's additional abuse and fraud in the system, and we do have other investigations ongoing.
How did this case come to you?
This case came to us not from the Arizona Department of Education or the Superintendent of Public Instruction. It came from a credit union who noticed an unusual withdrawal of $10,000 or more from an account and called my office to say, hey, you might want to check into this.
And they didn't know what the money was.
Correct. And they said, hey, something's fishy about this. They saw other circumstantial evidence, and I can't go into that, but they had the wherewithal, they had the wits about them to call the Attorney General's office, and we started investigating. It did not come from ADE. It came from a bank.
Is the Department of Education cooperating? Does Tom Horne know about this?
I don't know if Tom Horne knows about this yet. I mean, he'll know after today because we made the announcement. We do have an individual inside ADE who's been cooperating with us on this case, providing the documents, helping us get the documents, including the fake birth certificates. One individual submitted 3 fake birth certificates, all with the same birthday. so alleging she had triplets, and another one who submitted twins with the same birth date. And so, and again, a birth certificate that, kind of looked legitimate, but in other ways didn't. And so you have to ask the question, are they even looking at the birth certificates? Are they even looking at the documentation that needs to be provided to prove that your child has disabilities? And we have that documentation that was forged and provided in order to get the extra money. Because as you know, you get a significant bump in cash if your child is proven or declares that they have a disability, whether it's autism or another disability. And I think there's real questions whether that documentation is being looked at and whether that documentation is being provided by doctors who actually know what they're doing.
Is this a wake-up call for the legislature?
I think it ought to be a huge wake-up call for the legislature. And anybody who turns a blind eye to this is just not serious. And if they turn a blind eye to this fraud, then they are nothing but ideologues. And I think the voters at the end of the day are gonna react to this.
I want to pivot to another indictment, a series of indictments from your office this week involving landlords here in the Valley. It looks like this is a case of landlords allegedly rigging rents.
Yeah. I think we all have been asking the question, why is rent so incredibly high and astronomical in Phoenix and in Tucson and frankly other parts of the state? And we started doing some digging. We also saw a lawsuit on this that was filed in Washington, D.C. by the AG there, and found that there's this company, an algorithm-based software company called RealPage, that has been bringing landlords in and colluding with landlords to artificially elevate and increase rents. And the way the scheme works is the landlords all agree to provide very specific proprietary information to RealPage. RealPage takes that into their algorithm, and then they spit out a rent that everybody needs to abide by in order to keep prices high in our urban areas in Arizona. And it's a big part of why we have such a problem here.
To that point, I've been in contact with a tenant at one of the complexes owned by a company named in the lawsuit, and the tenant shared email correspondence with me. This tenant was told that the landlord, quote, normally adjusts rates about every 2 days to ensure we're aligned. Every 2 days to adjust the rent on an apartment?
It's insane. It's insane, and it is probably because of this algorithm. And, I think one of the most insidious things about this is that most people can't afford to move every 2 days or even every year. And so their rents are going up because of this RealPage algorithm and because all these landlords are colluding with each other and with them every year, 2 to 7% rent increases every year. And it's hard to move. It's expensive to move. So I think people just give up. And RealPage has instructed those landlords to tell renters, you really ought to just stay because it's really expensive to move. And the other thing about this and why this violates our Consumer Fraud Act is that renters were not told about the existence of RealPage. And in fact, the landlords were specifically instructed by RealPage to conceal the existence of RealPage and this algorithm. And that is an unfair trade practice, an unfair practice under the law. So it's a violation of antitrust laws, and it's a violation of our Consumer Fraud Act.
I know renters want to know now, and future renters, what's going to be in this for me? Is there a restitution?
Yeah, we are going to aggressively seek restitution for renters. There is a clear delta between what the renters in buildings controlled by RealPage were paying and renters who were in buildings that were not controlled by RealPage. And I want to get that money back for renters. They were overcharged systematically in Phoenix and Tucson. Bram, 70% of the renters in buildings in Phoenix are controlled by this company, RealPage, and their algorithm. 70%. If that's not a monopoly, and if that's not unfair, I don't know what is. And down in Tucson, it's 50%. So this is a huge part of our affordability crisis in Arizona. And quite frankly, I don't think it's too much to say that people were made homeless by this scheme.
That's a pretty big charge.
Yeah, but I think it's realistic. If your rent is going up $200 a year or more, and you're living paycheck to paycheck like many people in Arizona do, then it's highly possible that you could be put out on the streets. You could be evicted. And you know what's so egregious about this is these landlords don't care, and RealPage don't care. You know why? Because it's not about occupancy anymore. They don't care about occupancy. They don't care whether they have a full building. What they care about is making sure that they can charge the remaining renters a high price. And by doing that, they continue to make more and more profit. In the old days, you know, probably back when you and I were renting, in the old days, one building would compete against the next building, and if there was a price increase over here, this guy over here is going to lower his price to try to attract those tenants over to their building. And that, we don't have a competitive market in Arizona anymore.
After Attorney General Kris announced the indictments in the alleged school voucher fraud, Republican School Superintendent Tom Horne called a news conference to dispute her account of how the case unfolded.
When I was the Attorney General, I always gave credit to people who deserved credit. Her philosophy is the opposite. Not only does she not give credit, but she is not truthful about saying that we didn't flag them, when in fact, with the sole exception of the case that was discovered by a credit union, we've sent her all of the fraud cases that she has.
And RealPage, the company targeted by Mays in the Landlord lawsuit, is a $9 billion business that has been named in suits across the country. The software company gives landlords pricing recommendations on 4.5 million housing units nationwide. A spokesman has said that RealPage, quote, uses aggregated market data from a variety of sources in a legally compliant manner. You can see my full interview with Attorney General Kris, as well as her comments on the status of her fake electors investigation on our YouTube channel. Go to 12news.com/YouTube. When we come back, it's a must-watch primary battle. A right-wing Republican backed by election deniers takes on an incumbent Republican who helps run our elections. But first, my wide-ranging interview with Maricopa County's new sheriff, Russ Skinner, on Penzone, Arpaio, and why he's running as a Democrat for a 4-year term. Stay with us.